Before 1950, every guardrail end on an American highway was a flat cut of steel, open, unshaped, unmodified, no cap, no angle, just metal that stopped at a point. If you drifted off the road and hit that end head-on, the steel entered the car like a spear. This was not a design accident. This was the approved standard, installed across the entire country, paid for with federal tax dollars. Hundreds of thousands of guardrails with ends like that are still standing on American roads today. Not because nobody knows, but because no one ever treated the end as a problem, until too many people died the same way. This is not the story of one greedy company or one careless engineer. It is the story of how we design safety, and how we have made the same mistake over and over for a full century. You need to understand what American roads looked like before guardrails existed. In the early 20th century, highways were built with nothing on either side. No barrier between your tires and a ditch, a cliff, or a tree. The decision to install something physical, something that could stop a car before it disappeared, had never been made at a national level because no crisis had been large enough to force it. That changed with one number. In 1951, America recorded its 1 millionth traffic fatality since the automobile first appeared on its streets. 1 million people. Not from war, from roads. The first guardrails were not carefully engineered safety products. They were wooden planks nailed to posts, exactly like farm fencing. The job was simple: keep the car from going over the edge, not to reduce speed, not to absorb impact, not to protect the driver inside, just to hold 2 tons of steel from going off a cliff. Wood split, wood rotted. Wood could not stop a car traveling 60 miles an hour, so engineers switched to steel. And that is where the first problem began, not because of the steel itself, but because no one asked what would happen if that steel was hit from the wrong direction. By the late 1950s, America was building the most ambitious road system in human history. The Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956 funded more than 41,000 miles of interstate highway, roads that connected every corner of the country, crossing mountains, threading through cities, cutting across open plains. Along every mile of those roads, guardrails were installed at a scale that had never existed before. The chosen standard was the W-beam, a corrugated steel rail shaped like the letter W in cross-section, mounted on posts driven into the ground. The shape was not arbitrary. The W profile provided strength in 2 directions simultaneously, capable of absorbing a side impact and redirecting a vehicle back toward the road. The system worked for one specific thing: stopping cars from leaving the side of the road. But there was a part that no one thought about seriously. A part that was never tested under real conditions until years later: the end. Every guardrail has 2 ends. At the point where the steel rail stops, something has to close it off. The easiest solution, the cheapest, the fastest to install: cut the steel and leave it open. Or bend it slightly downward so it doesn't look so exposed. No crash test for that part. No simulation. No formal question about what happens when a car hits that end from the front instead of the side. The answer came from the road, not the laboratory. By the mid-1960s, engineers were collecting reports whose pattern could no longer be ignored. Cars that drifted off the road and hit a guardrail end head-on did not simply stop. The steel entered the cabin. It came through the dashboard, through the driver's seat. Some victims were not thrown from the car. They were pinned to it. And because no one had ever designed that part for a frontal impact, there was no safety standard governing it, no data being collected systematically. People were dying in ways that could have been prevented, and those deaths were not recorded as design failures. They were recorded as accidents. Here is the part most people get wrong. The guardrail was not broken. It had not failed. It was doing exactly what it was built to do. It stood firm. What no one had accounted for was that standing firm could kill when a car hit from a direction no one had anticipated. The first fix, developed in the early 1970s, was called the turned-down terminal. The end of the guardrail was twisted and buried into the ground, so no open steel faced upward. The spearing problem was solved. A new problem appeared. Cars that hit the buried end were launched upward, rolled over, and continued sliding across the highway on their roofs. Every solution exposed a safety gap that had not been visible before. Not because the engineers were incompetent, but because no one had ever tested the full system before installing it at hundreds of thousands of points across America. In the 1970s, the Texas Transportation Institute, a road safety research organization affiliated with Texas A&M University, began working on something that had not existed before, a guardrail end terminal designed specifically to absorb the energy of a frontal impact. The concept was simple. The engineering was not. Build an end that collapses in a controlled way when hit head-on, absorbing the car's speed gradually without directing it into a more dangerous path. The first prototype was called the Breakaway Cable Terminal, crash-tested in the early 1970s using full-size passenger vehicles. The results were good enough. It absorbed the impact, didn't enter the cabin, didn't launch the car into the air. It was certified. It was installed. Then someone tested it with a compact car. A smaller vehicle with less mass and a different center of gravity reacted differently to the same energy. The certified breakaway cable terminal speared the compact car, exactly like the blunt end it was designed to replace. The new design killed differently than the old one, but it still killed. Back to the beginning. Standards were revised, a new terminal was designed, tested again, and that cycle, design, test, find the failure, redesign, continued for years, while American roads remained filled with terminals from previous generations that had not been replaced. Think about what that actually means. Every time engineers solved the problem, the old version of the problem stayed in the ground, bolted to posts, along roads that millions of people drove every day. In the late 1990s, the Texas A&M Transportation Institute developed a new terminal that was considered a genuine leap forward in guardrail safety. It was called the ET+. It worked differently from every design before it. When struck head-on, the terminal did not collapse inward. It pushed the steel rail sideways, unzipping the guardrail like a ribbon, slowing the car without driving steel into the cabin. Engineers called it ribboning. The terminal was tested, certified, and installed on federal highways across America, considered finished. Then in 2005, Trinity Industries, a Dallas company with annual revenues of $6.4 billion that manufactured the ET+, made a change to the terminal's design. They narrowed the internal feeder chute from 5 inches to 4 inches, 1 inch. The change was never reported to the Federal Highway Administration. No new crash tests were conducted. No approval was requested. Trinity continued sending certifications to the federal government stating that the product it was delivering was identical to the version that had been approved. The savings from that change, approximately $50,000 per year. For a company with $6.4 billion in annual revenue, that is roughly 12 minutes of income. Nobody told the people driving past these terminals every day. Joshua Harmon was not a safety engineer or a federal investigator. He was an entrepreneur from Virginia who also manufactured guardrails, a competitor of Trinity. In his work, Harmon began receiving field reports about accidents whose pattern did not make sense. Cars hitting the ET+ head-on, but instead of the rail unzipping, the terminal locked, did not move. The steel drove into the cabin. He gathered data. He documented more than 40 deaths and more than 100 injuries involving the modified ET+. In 2012, he filed a whistleblower lawsuit under the False Claims Act, a federal law that allows private citizens to sue companies that defraud the government. A federal jury in Texas ruled in October 2014 Trinity had defrauded the government. The judge tripled the damages and added penalties, a total of $663 million. It was one of the largest whistleblower verdicts in American history obtained without Department of Justice involvement. Trinity appealed. In 2017, the appeals court overturned the verdict on the grounds that the federal government, even after learning of the jury's decision, continued using the ET+ on its highways. The Supreme Court declined to hear the case. No penalty was ever paid. The modified ET+ was removed from the list of federally approved products on December 31, 2017, 12 years after the design change was made. But Trinity was not alone. After the trial, investigators found that another manufacturer, Lindsay Transportation Solutions, with a product called the X-Lite, faced similar allegations. Terminals that were supposed to absorb impact. Terminals that were spearing cars instead. The pattern repeated. Today, blunt-end guardrails, open steel terminals with no cap, no treatment, no modification, are still installed on American roads, not because nobody knows, but because replacing them requires a budget that is not always available, and because there is no national system that tracks which terminals are still dangerous and where they are located. In Tampa, Florida, a young woman named Jada was killed when her car struck a damaged, unreplaced blunt-end guardrail on Interstate 75. Her family created a social media account and uploaded photographs of the guardrail, an exposed, corroded steel edge on the side of a highway traveled by thousands of vehicles every day. The photos were posted in July 2026. That guardrail design had been considered obsolete since the 1960s. More than 60 years. Here is the pattern. We discover that our design kills. We build something new. We test the new thing, but not enough. Not in every condition that will eventually occur on a real road. We install it. Years later, we discover that the new solution also kills, in a different way. And while that cycle runs, every previous generation of guardrail stays exactly where it is, on the shoulder of the interstate, on the curve of the highway, at the corner you drive past without looking. Nobody calls this a pattern out loud. Nobody describes it in those terms at a press conference or a federal hearing. It gets called an accident, a malfunction, a product defect. Trinity Industries was not an anomaly. 1 inch narrowed to save 12 minutes of revenue was not a decision born in a vacuum. It was born from a century of the same logic. Install first, test later, replace when enough people have died. The guardrail stands at the edge of the road as proof that we protect drivers. But more often than you know, that guardrail is the answer to the last problem, one that has already brought a new problem we have not finished solving. You pass it every day. You never think about it. Nobody does, until someone doesn't come home.